Finance. Ms. DeMarco, are you ready? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
We have a couple of things going on. Mr. Morris has done a revision to the budget, and we also have to have a discussion about the bond issue. I don't know if Mr. Craig is here.
Yeah, Mr. McCaig should be unmuted now. Mike, are you there?
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
I think we
Yeah.
would do that first, and Mr. Craig, if you could kindly, Mr. McCaig, please give us a briefing on our bond refinancing, which we have been hoping to hear about tonight.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Marco. It's good to see everybody. Certainly a lot has happened since I was in front of you last. I'll try to condense it as best I can, but I think in the end you'll find that it's all really good news. As you recall, we were all set to do the bond issue back in the late fall, November. You passed an ordinance that authorized us to move forward when certain parameters were met. And the purpose of that bond issue was to refinance your 2012 and 2015 bond issue. Unfortunately, the one piece had to be done taxable because we were not close enough to the call date to allow us to do it on a tax exempt basis. Interest rates moved away from us at that point where the savings was not meeting the objective. So we were sitting tight and kind of tapped the brakes, if you will. As we waited as a backstop, we moved closer and closer to the call date, which for two reasons became good news. Number one, we're now in a position to do the entire bond issue on a tax exempt basis, which means obviously rates will be better for refinancing on both sides. And secondly, we've weathered the COVID market, and interest rates are really at a good position. So I've put together an analysis, which you have, and let me explain the several options that have presented themselves since then. The first option, obviously, is to do the bond issue on a full tax exempt basis, which you've already authorized. We are at the, we can actually go ahead and do that at this point. The savings is past the threshold. We're at about a $275,000 present value savings. You had authorized the savings. It's well less than that, and so we could go ahead and we could go ahead and do that. Also in what you authorized was $250,000 in some capital projects, and again we could go ahead and move in that direction. We are not allowed to sell the bonds until the end of this month or the first part of, actually the end of this month at the earliest, because the bond issue cannot close 90 days prior to November 1st because of tax code law, because of the tax code, to keep it all tax exempt. So that's the reason why we have to wait, and now's the appropriate time. So option one is basically the status quo, what we've been talking about all the way through, except now we can do the whole thing on a tax exempt basis and picking up more savings. You may recall at one point savings when we first started were probably in the mid hundreds, maybe 170, 80,000. It had dropped to maybe 72,000. At one point we were hoping for 100,000. At one point I looked back and saw the savings had actually dropped to 25,000. And then back in the fall, it had, come back to 150. And there was one other time that I ran it where it was, it was in this close to 300 range. So that is, that's kind of a history of where we've gone. In the interim, though, we looked at some alternatives for bank financing, and we had the ability. We've talked to several banks. but one in particular that we've been doing a lot of business with, particularly on the East Coast, is JP Morgan Chase. And for whatever reason, they've been very aggressive in quoting rates. I believe that really the genesis of that is that they want to move into the Pennsylvania market aggressively. So they have been quoting loan rates that have been substantially lower than the other banks that we have seen. And they do have certain parameters that they need to meet. Not everything that we have shown them has met with their parameters, whether it be credit, whether it be term. They have an average life that they want to see. So they're relatively picky with what they see. But we got over all the hurdles that they need to see initially, and certainly because all your documents and audits are public information. They've done an initial analysis, and needless to say, your credit is very good because we did the rating report, and they quoted an initial interest rate to us that was what we, compared to what we've been seeing from other banks, is really fabulous. So I've put that together and that's option 2 and option 3. So option 2 is pretty close to the bond issue. It's a little bit better. It has a call provision. Actually, it's a 4-year call versus a 5-year call on the bonds, and it has about a $25,000 increase in savings. Now, when you look at the two options, option 1 and option 2, you'll be saving about $25,000 in this current fiscal year, and then you'll be saving, depending on the option, about $220,000 on the bond issue, or $243,000 in fiscal year 21. And then you can see the difference is about $25,000 present value savings, and that's net of expenses. The bond issue versus the bank note with JP Morgan Chase will have a marginal difference in cost of issuance, not that much, and I've calculated that into these numbers. But after that, you will see that the payments, as compared to your existing debt, which is in column 2 of the sheet that's in front of you, is virtually the same as what you have now. So you will have no increase in debt service. You'll get those upfront savings or reductions in debt service, and you'll be able to borrow $250,000 in capital projects. So option 1 and 2 are virtually the same, except for a little more savings with the bank note. You have the call provision, and you can go with either of those. Option 3 is also the bank note, but it has a much lower interest rate because it would be a non-callable bank loan. And the note is probably a third of a percent lower in interest rate, but the savings is rather significant. I mean, it's about, as you can see, about 80,000 more in savings, but you will not have the ability to refinance this. Now, that is a pretty significant thing to think about. And what I want to explain, and I want to make sure you understand the difference. The interest rate on the loan is 1.59%. So what you have to weigh is that $80,000 worth that lower interest rate and more present value savings? Now, the possibility or probability of ever refinancing a loan at 1.59% is fairly low, you would think, over the next 14 years. So, that's a consideration. I typically don't like to do non-callable pieces of debt just because you're locked into it for the balance of the loan. I mean, you're locked into this for 14 years. But again, when you're in the around 1.5%, you know, it's rather far-fetched to think that you're going to refinance that down to a lower interest rate. So it is a viable option, I think, in this case, to go ahead and consider it and take the higher interest rate. Just know that it's not anything that you'll be able to refinance. You can restructure it, but you are going to be stuck with this the whole way through. And you know, in my opinion, if you were a lower rated community and you were ever going to want to restructure your debt or do something like that for a loss or lower your payments, you know, that's another consideration. But you, as Forest Hills Borough, and your rating and your financial situation, I don't think that you would ever, you know, want to restructure this debt, stretch it out, lower the payments, and do it at a loss. So I don't think that's a consideration either. So option 3, I think, for you is a viable option. I just want to really stress that non-callable debt is something that you want to, you know, just make sure you understand. And then option 4 is basically option 3. I just chose one of the 3, but I added $250,000 to the amount of deposit to the project fund. So you'd be getting an additional $250,000 in project funds in option 4. And as you can see, the savings drops a little bit because you're paying more interest, but your payments are exactly the same. And we do need to put a little bit of payment into 2035. So there's a partial payment in that 15th year, but it does not increase your payments as compared to column 2 or your existing debt. So the interest rate would be the same, and we could really, you know, we'd really do the same thing, you know, with option 1 or option 2 if you wanted to take the additional project dollars, you know, whatever it would be, 300, 350, 400, 500, and structure it the same way. So I didn't want to do another 3 options just because I thought it would be confusing, but it would look exactly the same as option 4 if you wanted to increase the amount of project dollars. So I've boiled it down to this. Any of them are viable options. The only other thing that I wanted to say about the bond issue is you'll notice that the interest rates for the bond issue are at current rates and they move. So, you know, they go up and they go down. The interest rates are, or this analysis is at interest rates as of today. The bond issue would be done at interest rates as of the end of June. So we don't know where rates are then. I think with the bank loan, we could probably have a commitment letter within 10 days to 2 weeks and have a firm commitment on either option 2, 3, or 4 and have that locked in. The only minor negative to that is we'll have to do another ordinance, and that needs to be passed so that you can enter into a bank loan, you know, commitment, because the ordinance for the bond issue will not work for the ordinance or for the commitment on the bank loan. We'll just, because we have different, it's just not, it's apples and oranges, and we can't work with that. So I've covered a tremendous amount of ground here in whatever that is, 10 minutes. Let me answer any questions that you guys have.
Mike, it's Steve. We have time to pass an ordinance, correct? That could be approved probably in July at the July meeting. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Any time. I mean, if July could be fine. If you wanted to do a little bit sooner to have a special meeting, I don't know how often if you do have special meetings. If you have another meeting and you wanted to just advertise that meeting as a meeting under the Debt Act, we could probably do that as well. But, you know, it's the beginning of, or the end of June is only the first starting date. So it can be done anytime thereafter. It's just a matter of, you know, we're here with these numbers now. It's just kind of, I feel like historically, these are pretty attractive numbers. And it'd be nice to, you know, it'd be nice to get these more or less locked in, whichever direction you choose and whichever amount for the capital projects you choose to do. If it's the bond issue, we're set to go. That's fine. We go that direction. If you do want to do this thing with JP Morgan Chase, which obviously does have its advantages, we'd have to pivot a little bit, which is no big deal, and go in that direction.
I have a question. Did you do a scenario for a bond issue with 500,000 in additional capital?
I don't have it here in front of you, but it would really look a lot like option 4.
Okay, they would look pretty equivalent.
Yeah, what would happen is it would have a little bit of payment. The payments would be the same. The saving first couple years under the bond scenario would look about the same. So fiscal year 20 and 21 would be about the same. The payments would be the same going out through 33, and then fiscal year 34 and 35, you would have an increase.
Okay,
So it would look a lot like option 4, except the interest rate's higher than the one on option 4 because of the fact that it's non-callable. The bond issue does give you the ability to refinance in the future. With rates where they are now, you never know where interest rates are going to go. But
would the bond issue be a fixed interest, or would that fluctuate as conditions change over the 14 years?
Everything I'm showing you is fixed rate through the life. They would both be the same payments, same interest payments dates as you have now. Annual principal payments on November 1st, semi-annual payments on May 1st and November 1st, just as your 2 bond issues have now. So as soon as everything I'm showing you would be fixed through the life. Bond issue and bank note.
Other comments or questions from other council members at this time?
Mike, can you just, I guess I want to return to time. So if it's a bond issue, they've already passed the ordinance. Is there anything else they have to approve? Do they have to do, I guess, a motion to approve whichever option as far as the bond is that they're taking, as well as whether they're doing additional borrowing above the 250,000? Is that correct?
I don't think there's anything else you need to do in terms of the ordinance. I think we have enough room in the ordinance that foresaw the potential to increase the amount for capital projects. I think it would be a good idea, since we were, at some point you had determined that you wanted 250,000. If you're going to change that 250, I think something that's somewhat official to let me know what that is might make some sense. But just something to let me know what that number is might be appropriate, and there would be nothing else that needed to be done for the bond issue.
We have a business meeting on the 17th of June. And I don't know if we need to take action before that to authorize either the bond at 250 or 500, or to go to a bank loan at 250 or 500. Mr. Morris.
Well, if you're going to do the note, he said you'd have to do an ordinance. So that takes some time to advertise, to prepare. Steve hasn't been doing the ordinances for us. We had, I forget the name of the attorney now. I'm sorry.
Jack.
Jack Canvas.
Yeah, that's right. Do it. I don't know if Steve would be the one to do that ordinance or not, but it'd have to be advertised. I don't think there's enough time to advertise it in time for next Wednesday's meeting. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, we couldn't do it by next Wednesday, no. We could
The
do it
Jul-
time as early as maybe one of the committee meetings or the committee meeting in July. It doesn't sound like they're, I mean, I don't know, with the rates, and Mike would have to speak to the rates, you know. If time is of the essence to secure the bank rates, if that's the route council wants to go, time may be of the essence, and you may want to even consider a special meeting just to pass the ordinance, and we could, you know, that could probably be done the second or third week of June. But if you're going to go with a bond, I think the only thing we would need to do is direct, if we're going to ask for Mike to go after 500 versus 250,000, say so in some kind of motion at the meeting next week. So then he has his marching orders. I can't tell you which is the way to go. I don't know. I know you're not asking me, but I've only been through these bond issuances, bank loans, nothing more outside of financing for equipment or something along those lines. So I can't give you any advice in that regard. You have to rely on Mr. McKay.
So I wondered, does anyone see a big advantage to going to a bank loan versus a regular bond at this point?
I would like to voice my opinion here.
Yeah.
I think that option one basically gives us what we asked for. Everything's in place, and we can get this done without worrying about how crazy these markets can be.
Exactly.
So I don't like option four. If you look at the last 2 years, the amount of money that you're paying back on that is substantial.
Mhm.
But again, I think the option one is what we basically asked for. That is what we got, and I think that's the best way to go at this particular point in time, my opinion.
Does anyone have any additional comments? Is there an argument for doing the 500 instead of 250 under option one?
Patty, if I could, my only thought is we need to take a quick look at our capital budget. Every year it keeps getting backed up and backed up. We're pushing projects back.
Right.
I think we need to see things that need immediate attention. And if we need to take more, maybe not 500, you know, maybe we stick it with 250, but I think we need to see what needs done that we can't put off any longer, because this might be the only opportunity we get in the next 10 to 15 years to get these projects done.
Yeah, I was looking at the capital budget as well as we were looking at our current budget situation. If the payment schedule is not significantly different for taking out 500,000 instead of 250 under an option one bond scenario, I would really like to see what those numbers look like. You did not run that chart for us, but I think we do have, with the uncertainties of situations right now, I think the need for a cushion in our cash budget would be a wise move if it isn't too expensive to do that. Mr. McKay, could you?
I agree with you, Patty. I also agree with Tom. We've been pushing back a lot of much needed maintenance, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And you know, deteriorating maintenance is only going to cost more and more as time goes on. So we need to get the capital budget back on, and it will relieve some stress off of our regular budget. So I believe that if we do this now, I think now is the time. I agree if our payments stay the same. So I agree with taking it out in the bond issue, the extra 250 if we can.
Mr. Erblinger, do you have an opinion about this? You're on the committee.
As long as we don't spend any more money than we would normally not spend, you know, like,
Right.
I don't want to, I don't know.
Increase the debt service. Yeah. Right.
But like back to that bond versus bank, as long as the rate is similar, I don't really care either way.
Okay, Mr. Morse.
Yeah, Mike, just to clarify, whatever extra money we get from the bond issue, we have to spend a certain percentage of that in the first 3 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, the rule is, I mean, there are several other bells and whistles, but you need to reasonably expect to spend 85% of the money within 3 years.
So the reason why I had asked him to do a larger number than 250, just in case, was because of the recent issue with the budget, as I'm going to talk about later, and the fact that we do fund the capital budget from the general fund. So if you were to take out, whatever you take out, whether it's 250 or more, you could spread that over the next couple of capital improvements plans, depending on what you do. And you'd still be within proper legal point to spend it as you're supposed to.
Mr. McCaig, could you run us an option of the bond issue with a 250,000 doubled to 500 and just line out what the payment of our debt service would look like under that scenario compared to scenario 1 with only 250?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think I would like to see that before we make a determination. I am not thrilled with the idea of doing a bank loan at this time. I think by the time we get all the logistics in order, the situation could be markedly different in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And the bond market is, I think, going to be stable in the time that it's going to take us to make a decision and execute on this in the next couple of weeks, because we've already done the ordinance. It's a question of how much capital we make an allowance for. And I would like to see in writing the comparable 500,000 project fund to the 250,000, just side by side before we make a decision about that. And I would like to be prepared to make that decision at our meeting on the 17th when we take up finance that time. Would everyone feel comfortable making a decision between 250 and 500 capital fund if we make that decision on the 17th? Everybody okay? I'm seeing nods and yeses.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're simply saying is you're going to take option 1 with the
Right.
bond issue, and you're going to ask him to run the numbers for 250, which we have currently,
Right,
and you're going to ask him to do $500,000
Exactly.
as well.
exactly.
And then, okay, so we'd be making a comparison between option 1 for 250 and option 1 for 500. Am I correct?
That's what I thought, yeah.
Okay.
And I think if we have those two side by side, we'd be in a position to make a decision about what our payment obligations are, and they would be in parallel in front of us. And I think we can do that on the 15th because the ordinance is already in place.
Can I ask a question? Can we also maybe run 375? Is pretty much splitting the baby in the middle. No, it doesn't. So we'll have 3 options to consider. We have to look
Sure.
at it. It doesn't cost much extra work, I think.
Okay. All right, so we'll look at 3 options, and if we could have that a little bit in advance of our meeting on the 17th, so I have time to look at it before the day of the meeting, that would be very helpful indeed.
No problem at all.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Mr. McCaig at this time? You all good? We have good marching orders? Okay, in that case, I would like to return to Mr. Morris for some discussion about the financial condition and the revisions to the budget. If you could please take the lead on that, Mr. Morris.
Yes. Okay. First, I have a note about cash flow. That's attached to your handout. Whoops. And
I've lost Mr. Morris. Anybody
Mr.
else?
Morris, you're muted, sir.
Steve? Steve, you are muted on the screen.
Okay, now you should be able to hear me, I hope.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
There we
I'm
are.
sorry, I must have hit the wrong button. Let me go back to the share. This is the past 5 years cash flow, and the red line that you see right here at May, where the little hand is where we stand going into June. 1.2 million in cash. It's pretty standard. It's a little bit better than we were last year, and I think when we talk a little bit more about the budget in a minute here, you'll have a better idea of what I mean by that. So I'm going to take that off the screen. Item C is the revised budget draft. I gave you this draft to look at. I'm not going to show it on the screen because there are some issues with it. Well, actually, what I could show you on the screen is the notes I have here for it. So maybe I'll just put that up real quick. It'll save time. What I've done was try to take into account, based on the things I learned from PA Municipal League and others who have been giving us webinars on revised budgets, where we should take money from and what we should consider as far as expenditure changes and things like that. So the budget you have that was attached to your email that I would like you to review and bring back with you in July, or actually I will update it with the latest numbers at the end of June so you have a better picture of it. But it does show you what I've been playing around with as far as trying to take into account less revenue because of the pandemic. The budget you have still has a $64,000 deficit on it, but if you remember from what Mike was saying, there would be savings this year from refinancing the bond issue. So I did not show that in there. That's one of 3 points I want to make. The second point I want to make is that with expenditures, it's much harder to make changes. I show you key expenditure items where I made changes here, but a lot of numbers are fixed. For example, if I were to take the police budget, which is 1.9 million for 2020, and try to cut into that, almost every line item there is a fixed number. Salaries, contractual spending, things like that. There's not a whole lot of extra money there to really make a cut. And that's one reason why you don't see anything there as far as police savings are concerned. The third thing I wanted to mention is that I did take out money, assuming you're going to do the bond issue at least $250,000. I did take out the $151,000 that was earmarked for the capital improvements plan in this new revised budget to try to get to that savings that I have there. So all I'm asking is you take a look at this. If you have any questions, give them to me in an email or bring them with you to the July committee meeting so that I can go over it with you. And then July is a better time to make a decision, mainly because at that time you have 6 months worth of spending and revenues to look at. I'm also, one last point about the budget, then I'll see if you have any questions. I'm also concerned as to what exactly to do in some cases with this. For example, everyone's telling us earned income tax is going to be less, and it looks like it is going to be less. But as an example, on Monday, we got an additional $112,000 in earned income tax from the collector. So that brings us to $124,000 this early in June already that we got. And that's not too different from what we had last year for the whole month of June. Now, I know there's a slight delay in getting earned income tax money, but the agreement we have with the collector is that they're going to pay us weekly and that they're going to do a quick turnaround. So while some of the money may have been from March, it also should be money that's fairly recently collected as well. So estimating some things like that are really difficult. That's why I think you should wait until the July meeting to make any decisions. Any questions?
Yeah, I've attended a number of these webinars and skill shares. And I think one of the things we have to look at is not so much the immediate impact this year, although we might see some effects in the third and fourth quarter, but rather effect on revenues for next year. Things like liquid fuels and earned income tax might have a lag effect on us for next year's budget. So we have to be conscious of those kinds of things going forward. And I think that's another reason for taking more money on our bond refinance if we can. So it gives us a little more flexibility to move things around if we have to.
The other managers I've talked to
Yeah.
have agreed that probably future years, especially next year, are going to be much harder to budget for than
Yes.
revising a budget this year. I don't know if that's true or not again, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Any other questions for me on the budget? Please take a look at that.
Yeah.
I have some other notes there that I showed you on that screen, including just where the current other funds stand, like capital improvements and corrective action. Those summaries are on there for you as well. I don't know if you noticed them when I flashed that on there,
Yeah.
but they're on there as well. If not, I'm going to go on to my next point. I just have 3 more points. They're brief. This item D, you know that we have been talking about going to a new bank. PNC is charging us pretty heavily on fees. So we did an RFP, as you know, I think from 2 or 3 months ago, we mentioned that. And we got proposals from Dollar, PNC, and First Commonwealth. And Dollar and First Commonwealth ended up being the best. Wendy and Allison and I talked about it, and Allison and Wendy double-checked their contacts and also the various references. And while Dollar was reluctant to give us references, First Commonwealth wasn't. Dollar was going to give us references if we picked them. So in any case, both Dollar and First Commonwealth are pretty similar, and the staff believes we should go with First Commonwealth. That's something you would have to vote on at the meeting next week if you're okay with it.
Any other questions about that? I certainly have no problem moving away from PNC for a whole variety of reasons, which I won't get into. But I think First Commonwealth has a local office, and I think they've been forthcoming a couple of times, approaching us, wanting to do business with us. Anybody have any objections to moving to that?
Not at all. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so
Either of those 2 options, I think, are good choices.
so could we have a motion for the meeting on the 17th to move our accounts to First Commonwealth Bank on the recommendation of the staff?
Right, I'll do that.
Okay.
My 2 more items.
Mhm.
Back in March, you, because of the pandemic, extended fees through May 31st without penalty or other interest or fees or anything like that. I don't know if you wanted to continue that. Right now, Allison has mainly been the one handling fees, and she has not been placing any penalties or delinquent fees on any accounts right now. We have not been doing any water shutoffs. This would probably be a bad time to do water shutoffs anyway. But I wanted to know if you wanted to extend, because you'd have to have a motion, I think, on the 17th to do.
Does anyone have any objections to extending the waiver of fees and penalties for another 3 months?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
so
I'll put that motion.
Okay.
So for June, July, through August, in other words.
Yes, through August. And yeah.
Okay.
Revisit
And-
that, at the end of the summer and see where we are. Okay.
And the last thing will take a minute and a half. I'm going to give you a copy of the capital improvements plan preparation memo and forms that we use every year. It'll be in your mailbox this week. I was reluctant to do that because of the pandemic at first. I didn't know really how much we would really deal with that. But if you are going ahead with the bond issue, and even if you're not going above 250, if you're going, or if you are going somewhat above 250, I think it's worth still planning out 5 years. So I'm going to have the staff start that this month, have them submit something by the end of July. And you, of course, can submit stuff too, because remember, anything that's in the current plan that is not resubmitted is not included in the new plan. It's a 5-year plan, 2021, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And we consider anything capital as having a life of 5 years or more and $5,000 or greater in value. So that will be in your mailboxes, and it will be given to staff just for your information.
Okay. Any further issues on finance that anyone would like to
Yeah.
raise? time?
Yes, I have one final comment I would like to make on the bond issue. Whether it's $250 or $500,000 or anywhere in between is irrelevant to me. I think we need to go with that. However, it's been kicked around that there are different things that we have not been funding, et cetera. So I think that since we have to spend almost 85% of that money in the first 3 years, that we zero in on what items that we want to actually get done
Yes.
and make them priorities moving forward when we do this refinancing. Okay, I don't think that we should be looking at it as a way to take care of our deficit should we have one. So I think that's what we need to focus on and move in that direction starting next year. Thank you.
And that would be a good exercise as part of this capital plan then, so that
Absolutely.
Mr. Tomasic mentioned would be perfect.
Okay, any other comments or concerns? Okay, that concludes Finance Committee. Mr. Morse, thank you.
Second committee would be Borough Property, Mr. Thielacker. Thank you, Patty.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. President. Steve, you want to go ahead with your report?
Yeah, let me start it off with the COVID-19 stuff. And I have two other things after we talk about the pool. Basically, I just want to let you know that we are preparing in the office tentatively for a modified opening of the office as to the public after the July 4th holiday. We have a couple more things we want to get in, a couple more things we want to set up, but that's what we're working on. You can read the information, the things we're doing. It's not too different from stuff I've mentioned to you before, so I'm not going to belabor that, but if you have any questions, let me know. And of course, if things don't work out at July 4th, we will try to do it as soon after that as we can. We're going to have a lot of restrictions, similar to what other businesses have on. And if you have any questions, please let me know. The pool, though, is the big item I know people want to talk about. So I'm going to just start it for 30 seconds and then shut up. What I put on here essentially was the notes from recent conversations that a small committee has had in trying to decide whether or not to open it. It's been led by Keith Morris, who's our emergency management coordinator. Of course, Mayor Porco has been involved, as have Lynn and Cindy. Lynn and Cindy are both on this thing, and I'm going to open them up to being able to speak here in a few minutes as well. But the notes that you see on your handout are my summary from the meetings that have been held so far. So I'll let you take a look at them, and then if Tom wants to take the lead, or the mayor does, or Cindy, I'll unmute you in a minute. And I'm not sure which one Lynn is. There's two phone numbers on here. I don't know who that is. So someone's gonna have to tell me who to unmute. Hold on a second, Cindy. Tom, you can go ahead and start if you want to talk.
No, I mean, I don't really have anything other than, I guess, the updates from Frank and Cindy. Frank, I don't know if you want to lead the way there or update everybody on what's going on.
Cindy should be good to go. I don't know who the other person, is Lynn on here, Cindy, do you know?
I don't see her.
Do you know? What
Hi,
her phone number-
everybody. Let me call her.
So while Cindy is tracking down Lynn, I'll just kind of start. So we met last week to talk about just what to expect and what to plan. So a lot of this is mostly going to be review, some new stuff. Again, trying to err on the side of caution as we make our preparations to open the pool. The biggest concerns I know from Cindy and from Lynn's standpoint is just safety of the staff and safety of the people who are going to be attending the pool. So because of that, we've made a couple of decisions. One, there will be either the manager or an assistant manager at the front gate during the entrance times to kind of help manage the collection of money and also to ensure that people are observing the appropriate social distancing guidelines, maintaining 6 feet while they're standing in line ready to. So there'll always be 2 people at the gate to kind of manage that. Staff will be wearing masks as part of that process. And then we've also talked about how to, I guess, disinfect the money. So we'll have a money in and money out box so that we're not really managing transactions hand to hand with the staff and people coming in. We were looking at an online reservation system. I think Cindy can kind of give you some update on that. I believe she's had some conversation with a Shaler Township who has procured one, but has also said it was a bit of a nightmare. We're capping the entrance to 40 people at a time and basically having them swim for a 2.5-hour period, at which point they'll be asked to leave. There'll be a 30-minute disinfection period, and then we'll begin the next session for the next 2.5-hour session. And we will run like that basically on a modified schedule. And I believe we have started at 10 a.m. and then conclude our day at about, I think, 8 o'clock is how it works out. Essentially a 2.5-hour period.
8:30.
To 8:30. Okay, so a 2.5-hour period, a 30-minute cleaning period in between, and that allows residents to kind of maximize those afternoon sessions. So there'll be like I believe it's 1 to 3:30, and then I think a 4 o'clock to 6:30, if I'm not mistaken. We've come up with options if people are interested in doing a season pass. So we reduced our rates, as you can see. And this is something that I would like council's feedback on before I guess we end up finalizing that. What we ended up doing was just having passes made with no year on it in order to expedite that process and have those returned to us. Have we received delivery of those yet, Lynn?
Of the passes?
Yep.
Yep, got them today.
Okay, perfect. So right now, I guess what we're doing is offering 2 options. Option 1 is to just pay by cash for a session. But if you are one of those families that might be swimming a lot throughout the summer, we have season pass options available. And we've also revised individual swim sessions. So children and seniors will swim for $5 a session. Adults will swim for $10 a session. And again, the idea is to try and make things as simple as possible from a money and making change transaction standpoint. Also, the concession stand is going to be limited. So basically, no open containers. So basically, we'll be selling drinks that are sealed. Gatorade, bottled water, pop, and then ice cream. And really no hot foods or anything like that prepared, right? Keith feels kind of comfortable with that whole,
Yeah.
oh yeah, and chips, right? So anything basically that is sealed and doesn't have to be basically handled except for those people who are making the purchases. And again, we have, I think I think Lynn has developed a system to kind of manage and make sure that we're maintaining social distancing and there's no congregating at the C-stand, but just really an opportunity for you to place your order and then go pick it up when it's ready. But with just sealed drinks, no food being prepared, I think that we should be able to kind of move that line fairly quickly. Lynn, do you have any?
I think it'll be easy.
Okay. Progress at the pool, from what I understand, has been pretty good. We're just about ready to open, with the exception of, I guess, just getting the pool filled and then some of the treatment of that. So Steve, I'm sure you have an update for us on that.
If Jim is there, actually, Tom, he may know whether they did the work today or not, but they were supposed to start the work in the filter room. That's the real big hang up. Once that's done, then we can fill it. I don't know if Jim is there.
I can
with
tell
Tom
you.
knows. Go ahead.
I spoke to the guy that's doing the repairs today. And he said that he needs to make a different pipe because the dimensions were wrong on the one that he made. He expects it to take 2 days to be repaired, and then he said we should be able to start filling the pool next week. The water fountain park should be up and running, and we're allowed to open it.
All right. So Jim, do you have any additional? I'm sorry. Do you have any additional updates on that?
Let's just talk. You're good. They hear you.
No, I was off for 2 days on because there was a death in the family, but
Oh.
I had just heard what Lynn just talked about. So I'll be back in tomorrow. So,
And Mike is aware of what's going on as well.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so Tom, if I may, and Frank, I mean, I stepped into a meeting briefly. I happened to be in the council chambers or in the office when Steve was meeting with, I believe, Lynn and Cindy and Jimmy. Guys, we're like reinventing the wheel. I mean, other people already have their pools open between 125 to 175 people, and their pools are like a quarter the size of ours. So, like, we're like spinning our wheels trying to get up and going. And I tried to tell them, look, don't be set on this 30 to 50 people or 50 people or whatever, because the guidelines are completely changing. I mean, they're changing. They just changed this morning. So I don't want to be set on a direct number of how many people we can let into the pool. I also feel that $10 is a lot to ask someone for 2.5 hours at the pool. And that's just my opinion. And we can go back and forth on the change thing. I mean, if you're wearing gloves and you're handling money with gloves, I mean, I don't know that there's much interaction there. That's just my opinion. Again, another thing is, though, I mean, most public pools are at 125 to 175 maximum capacity right now. And their pools are, like I said, it goes off the actual pool area. So the body of water, not our deck. So our deck is 75 times bigger than everyone in the area. We have a large area, but it goes off the pool volume, and our pool volume is still 3 to 4 times the size of any pool in the area. And I'm speaking from Edgewood Country Club, Longview, Dormont. You know, these people already have restrictions in there at 125 or 175, and they're abiding by the CDC guidelines. So we need to rethink and make sure that we're on top of it and make sure we're letting in the maximum number of people. You know, you had everyone locked up for 3 months, and kids are wanting to get out and they want to go to the pool, and you know, parents are, I can only imagine. I don't have any kids. It has to be tough.
So just to be clear, I appreciate your comment. Just to be clear, the hang up here is not us figuring out the scenario.
No, I know we're still getting the pool up, Frank. I'm just,
right.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's the hang up.
Okay.
I came into the meeting and I just caught, went there to make another comment about something else. And I caught them, you know, in the meeting for the pool. And I said, don't spin your wheels at setting a number of 40 or 60 or 80 guests. Make sure that we're just getting their basics down, and we'll figure out the guest when we can open. Because if we're opening next Monday or the following Monday, we could be at 250. There could be the maximum could be, you know, so I just don't set a number in stone right now that we're setting our maximum occupancy to, when the number's changing and evolving every day. That's my main point.
I think your point's well taken, and I get it. I think what we did was we initially set that number at 50, and I think we also left, so nothing's ever set in stone, right? The idea is to make sure that the staff on hand can handle that number of people with all the restrictions that we're trying to manage around, including the disinfecting, et cetera. At which point, if we think we can manage more, then we'd certainly uptick it. I'd rather start low and move it forward rather than walk it back, because then I think that people would get upset about that more so than the other way.
Yeah, and so everyone else is doing, I don't know what the mixture is. I haven't found out what the solution is, but most people or most pools that I've been to already, they have the disinfectant in a spray bottle. And when the 2 hour or 2.5 hour session's up, everyone has to leave the pool area. They disinfect every chair. They walk around, spray it. It has to sit for 10 to 15 minutes. Once it sits for 10 to 15 minutes, the door's wide open again, 20 to 30 minute, you know, that block off for the sanitization process and disinfecting, and then everyone's allowed back in, you know. A little bit different scenario, as we're going to be letting in different people, but you know, it's the same kind of thing. You know, put the disinfectant in the spray bottle. We're going to have to figure out what the solution is. If we need to order some spray bottles in, I'm sure Jimmy and Steve can handle getting that in and figuring out what the solution is that we need to spray on the chairs.
We already have all that taken care of.
And
I was going to say, I think
You go first.
Lynn, you guys and Keith are probably already on that, right? Obviously already on that, right?
Yeah, we have the spray bottles. We have like pesticide sprayers. There's a bleach solution you can use, which is one third bleach to 2/3 water. I have the bleach. We have all kind of disinfectants. We're in good shape as far as the cleaning end things go.
I got you. My comment is too. I mean, I definitely think we could probably ramp it up at some point. I mean, I have no problem, I guess, starting where we're at, and then within the first week or two, see what's going on. You know, if we can follow the guidelines, let more people in. If there's a demand for it, we can certainly, get more people in there. My only last thing, kind of looking at it, I think that $10 does seem a little high for a 2-hour period.
I don't disagree with that.
I don't know if we want to just do, $5 for everything else for this year, with everything going on, make it a flat $5, see what happens.
I'm not married to a price, which is why I wanted to discuss it with council. Because you're right. At the end of the day, I guess the question then becomes, is it, I have not done the math. Maybe we can do a quick calculation on that and come back to it. But I just want to make sure we're, the option is to go swim for 2.5 hours for $5, or does it make more sense for people to buy the pass? And I guess we just got to figure out where that break point is for families, or just set the prices and not worry about it, right? And go from there. What about the revised pricing on the passes is the other question I had.
I mean, at least my personal opinion, with a quick look at it, I don't have a problem with that. I guess compared to the normal rates. Now, anybody else have any comments on those rates?
I think that $10 is a little bit high, but to some degree, it's good if we push people towards the pass, because then we have less cash to handle. I mean, I think $10 for adults and $5 for kids, it's actually good incentive to buy a $300 pass for most families. And then we have less cash to deal. If we make it too cheap, then people don't buy passes and we have to deal with all the cash. So I think $10 is maybe slightly high, but it's a good incentive for people to buy the $300 pass. So I could live with the $10. But I have a couple of other questions. It says ID for students. I realize some students have IDs, but some students don't have IDs. So what do you do with that? Like, you can't have every student have an ID, but if you go with parents, is it enough if parents have an ID? And then it says residents only will be permitted to bring up to 2 resident guests. Does that mean 2 parents and 2 kids are illegal? Or, I'm not sure what that language actually means. Residents will only be permitted to bring up to 2 guests, because everyone is a resident, so I don't know. And then the time doesn't make sense to me. It's 10 to 8:30. If we have 3-hour slots, including the cleaning, it would be 10 to 1, 1 to 4, 4 to 7, and then we only have 1.5. I think we have to start at 9 to make it work out, that everyone leaves the pool at 8:30, and then it would work. So I think there's a math error in that time.
Well, on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we have senior splash from 8:30 to 9:30.
Okay.
At the end of the day, we're usually very slow. We normally have under 10 people. And they're usually lap swimmers, and there's really, truthfully, maybe 3 families. So that hour and a half there, I think that's going to work.
Okay, because they only will have 90 minutes then. Okay. Then...
Yeah, so their time would be shorter, yes.
Okay. I just was wondering if there's like a math error or something.
No, that was just because that's the time of the day. And at that point, we're already going to be clean because we've been cleaning all day. Yes. So I can get the staff out of there, a little after 8:30.
Yes. And with the ID, because I think you won't let kids in without parents anyway. So parents' ID is probably enough. You don't have to have kids' ID.
Right. And I think that, truthfully, if you have, I think the photo ID is a good idea. We do have a lot of people that try to come in from out of borough.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, like an adult. I just question the kids because, like.
Yeah, the kids. That's a tough part because if a 14-year-old can come in, you're right. They don't necessarily have an ID. And if they do, it doesn't necessarily have their address on it.
Exactly, but 14-year-olds are not allowed to come without parents anyway, so you have a parent ID. So I don't know.
No, Marcus, we said it that 14 and above can come in unaccompanied. Anybody under 14 must be accompanied by a parent, right?
Exactly. So that's why I think for 14 and
Correct.
less, you don't have to worry. I mean, my kids have passports, but it would be a little bit overkill, but I guess I can, but there's no answer. So I don't know, it's practical. You know, I know public school students have a school ID, but there's no address, I think, on it either.
Right.
So the
Right.
whole ID with students, I think, needs a little bit. But if people buy a family pass, couldn't they just have the normal dog tags with a name? Or
Yes, they will. Yes,
That's
they
what
will.
they would have.
then it will help. They will address that. So,
Then we don't have to worry about it.
yeah, and I like what
But
you did. I like
we
what-
are required to keep a log of every person that comes in during the time periods with their address and phone numbers in case there is an infection. And the health department will be able to contact everybody.
That makes sense. So people with a pool pass, they will have their own little IDs, and that's good.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the last question, the booking system. I realize it's still work in progress, but I'm really concerned. You know, like when you have these big music concerts and they book out within seconds, I think we should limit to people can only book one session at a time or something like that. That it's fair. That not one family can book up the whole summer. Like it should be somehow limited.
We've thought about that as well, and we agree with you, because we don't want, like, you know, one family taking every single available slot, whether they use it or not, right? So it almost have to be on a daily basis. And on top of that, we are going to figure out a system that basically allows other people to take slots once, you know, so if you get Monday from 1:30 to 3 or 1 to 3:30, what have you, then, you know, you have to give other people that opportunity to take that slot later.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. As long people can't book the whole, maybe 1 or 2 session max.
Yep.
Because you know, like this music concert, pretty much you're done
Yeah.
in 2 seconds. I don't know.
I mean, the single most frustrating part about this, to be honest with you, has been just like, just when you think you have your arms around the guidelines, they change. And that's like the frustrating part of this, right?
But what Bill and Tom said, I think it makes sense to keep the 40 flexible. Like we start out with 40 guests, and then we will see how everything changes. We will be flexible. It's not set in stone, like you said. It makes sense.
No, it's not, right? So again, I mean, my biggest concern, I really don't care what other pools are doing. My biggest concern is, let's make sure, because again, the majority of the staff at that pool are teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Teenage kids who live in our community. So I think we have to look out for their interests first, make sure we're able to manage to it. And also Keith Morris was kind enough to agree to actually take a few personal days and actually be on site when we initially open, so he can provide some oversight, make adjustments on things that we're doing if they're not being done perfectly, etc. Right? Which will be, I think, a tremendous help just to have that guidance there as well, because he's very knowledgeable in terms of just managing around this kind of stuff. And again, the idea here is to mitigate the risk of this thing to you know, our staff as well as anybody coming in who's attending the pool.
Right. Yeah, that last bullet, like second to last bullet, residents will only be permitted to bring up to 2 resident guests. I think that line needs to be a little bit reworked. It sounds weird because a family of 4 should be allowed. And
okay, so it sounds like everybody's fairly pretty much in agreement. Let's just go back and revisit, I think, 2 things. So one, the hourly rate. Do we just want to go flat $5 a session regardless? And if so, just if you could just give me your thoughts on it real quick, and we'll just make a decision as a committee here. What's on the meeting?
I had one question. Are we going to come anywhere close to covering the costs for operating with our staff coverage and so forth? We're going to operate at a deficit this year, right?
I would expect, Patty, that is in fact the case, right? It's just this year being what it is, right? So $10 or $5, Tom. What are your thoughts there?
If I had to pick, I think I'd still go 5. I'm still worried. I just did the math real quick. For 300 for a family of 4, if they went 10 times, you're looking at $750 a person for each time they went. I still don't know, with everything going on with only 2.5 hours at a time, I think no matter what, we might not sell a lot of passes. It might be better off keeping the price lower just to get more people in the door. I think mean, I think I'd pay $5 to go in as an adult. If it's 10, me and my kid, I might not pay 15, but I'd pay 10.
Okay.
I agree with the $5 for everyone. It's easy to change and have it around and it works. And people who come often, for them it's $300 pool pass for families still worthwhile, I think.
All right. So everybody, Patty, Bill Gorel, Bill Tomasic, Bill Burley, 5. Okay. Sorry.
I'm fine with that.
Why don't we go ahead and change, Steve, if you don't mind, just making sure we capture that, that it's going to be just a flat $5 per session. Now let's go to
I hope Cindy's been taking notes.
Oh, okay. As long as somebody's capturing it, so we have it
I
set.
have it. I have it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate it. And then let's go to the season pass price rates. $300 for the season. Do we need to drop that, or do we keep it at 300? Thoughts on that as a council?
I'm just trying to do some math real quick, Frank, but I mean, I'm not even quite sure where to start. Offhand, what was our original season pass price going to be for this year?
I want to say 370.
Family pass, 370.
370, Cindy, for the family pass?
378.
And then what about the individual and the senior pass?
Individual 200. 125.
Well, that's what we normally would charge in a regular year, correct?
Correct.
All right.
I think the individual makes sense actually, because if you go 20 times, it makes it worthwhile. But a family of 4 going 20 times, do 20 times. Yeah, I guess $300 makes sense too. Family of 3, go 20 times. I think it makes sense.
Just to leave it as is?
Yeah.
The revised rates, you mean?
Yeah, if you have a family of 3, family of 3 go 20 times to get the money back. That makes sense.
Exactly. It really just depends on how frequently you attend.
An individual 15 times, 20 times as well to get their money back. If you go twice a week, I think you're open 10 weeks. It makes sense.
So if we're going to make the change, we're going to make, if we're going to make the change, we should make it now. And if we're good with the revised rates as they are, we'll just leave them as they are.
No, I think Marcus explained it good. I was trying to do the same type of thing. I have no problem leaving those pass rates the same. Go to $5 across the board for daily admission, and then I think we're good to go on that.
All right. Is anybody opposed to this? Bill Gorel, you good? Bill Burley, you good? Bill Tomasic, everybody else?
I'm fine, Mr. Jackson.
I'm good.
All right. So that's set then. That's good. And then was there anything else that kind of jumped out at anybody that is giving you a headache, or are we good to go with everything else that we talked about?
I think snack bar makes perfect sense what you're doing, because if you go only for 2.5 hours, you don't need hot dogs and burgers and all that stuff.
Right. And plus the person in there is going to have to wear a mask, and it gets to be about 130 degrees in there when you have everything going.
It makes perfect sense what you have.
Yeah.
I can tell you from the Forest Hills Farmers Market experience, people do pretty well with keeping line and keeping distance. It's been going pretty smoothly, so I don't expect any troubles at the pool.
No, we're going to have the ground marked, and if with 40 people to start until we get used to this, I think it's going to work out just fine.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about the registration, Mayor.
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 more second, Cindy, if you don't mind. Just give me 1 more second. 2 more things that I forgot to mention that everybody should be aware of. We're doing away with sponsorships for this year. So nobody outside of Forest Hills can come in. The primary reason for that is we kind of have our arms around what the case count looks like in the borough. We don't want to, again, to mitigate the risk of any spread of the virus. So sponsorships of outside families are canceled just for this year.
That makes sense. but the seniority should be kept. People who have it last year, they should be automatic, like how we had the seniority from one year to the next. That should be just paused, basically.
Agreed with that one.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I was going to say one more thing and it totally left me. So Cindy, go ahead and cover off on registration, please.
Okay. I did speak with the recreation director at Shaler. She said that the maximum they're going to admit into their pool is 200, and that her staff of 5 has been on this system for 6 weeks, and they still don't know if it's going to work. So because we have such a short window of time to get registration, she even suggested why not just do a phone-in registration. So the best way that we could do this is we revise the pool application, put the application on the website, then we start the communication, put it on the website when the pool's going to open, and this is what you need to do. I've also asked Steve if it would be a good idea to put it on the crime alert messaging so that more people get it if they miss it on the website and on Twitter. And then, like I said, once the application's online, then we put the responsibility on the people that want to purchase the application. I already have about 18 people that have already purchased that. So I was waiting to hear about the pricing before I send letters out to them stating, we discounted the pool passes. Do you want a refund or do you want a donation to the pool for the difference? Leave that also up to them. Then when they send in their pool passes, application and payment into the borough office, I get those, process them, give them to Lynn, and then we start with the phone-in registration. What we thought would work is start the registration 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. every day. That means either Lynn or Emily, the assistant manager, will be doing that every day, taking down all the time slots, and then 10 a.m. is over. Now, if we have a slow day, I don't know if that's going to happen, nobody knows. Then Lynn or Emily can call people and say, would you like to come to the pool at 4 o'clock or 6:30 or whatever it is, depending on what that schedule looks like for the day. I mean, they can do that in a matter of an hour as far as filling up the time slots. I'm just looking at it from both sides, whether it's going to fill up in 2 hours or if it is not. If it is
Cindy.
not, then like I said, they can contact. Go ahead, Bill.
Cindy, I do have one thing to add to that. Everyone's using like a registration or an app system. I know that Frank had touched on that earlier. They just don't work. So what we're seeing is people are registering for the pool and never showing up. So you have 100 reservations and then 35 to 50 people are there. Why? Because the clouds moved in the area that they live in the borough or whatever, or their kids don't want to go to the pool now. Right. And then you think, everyone's thinking that they went on the registration site and they're thinking that it's completely booked and no one's at the pool. So I really want to get away from that. Maybe go to a first come, first served basis, and you got to get there and, get there half an hour before your window, and then you get into the pool. I think that's the best way to do it. So it makes you show up to get into the pool. I don't know that there's any better option. Using an app, using a call-in system is just not working right now from what I'm seeing on the outside using these systems. And they've been in place for 2 weeks. So take it as you will, but that's my personal opinion.
So you're okay, and that's good because we don't even know if this is going to work really well. Unfortunately, that's the problem. So you say first come, first serve. We got our 40 people, and then we just turn away the 41st person.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That 41st person can stand there and they can wait a half an hour. Maybe someone goes in, jumps in the pool, swims 5 laps, and they walk out the door. So then why can't you let that person in? If you're going to set the restriction at 40 or 50, that's 40 or 50 in at one time. So once one person leaves, another person can come in. And that's my opinion on this.
Glenn?
But
I'm just trying to figure out how to
Glenn,
track this.
what do you think?
a little counter like they use at the bars. You're allowed to have 300 people in the bar. A little counter. It sounds stupid and repetitive, but a little $5 item where you're.
No, we do
clicking.
use one of those.
Yeah, so
But
maybe just use.
We would need one. We need one to go backwards, though.
Well, I guess that's true. You're right.
Yeah, and they're going to have so much responsibility to gate. I don't know, but there's. I hate to even say this, but there's one family in particular that everybody seems to be concerned about. They'll sit at the gate. I'm not lying to you, at 10:30 in the morning to be the first people in line every day.
Oh,
it's ridiculous. The personalities that we deal with. I have no problem with letting the first 40 people in and then going from there, but it's going to be the same.
Yeah, I think
people.
I like the booking between 8 and 10, and maybe 15 minutes after the time slot starts, people can call and then get added to the list, and then we can fill the empty slots. So people can call advice, and then is there any openings, and then they can just come and get it. So we have a combination.
This was our only sticking point, was how are we going to do this registration? Especially after I spoke with the rec director at Shaler, and she said, I don't know about the online registration. I don't even know if it's going to work. So she's a nervous wreck about their system. So
I think you have a plan in place.
Hi, Steve.
Everybody seems to agree with everything. I think it's time to, let's try it, see what happens, move on.
But could we at least add that, like, people can call in after the session started to fill up the empty spots? That would be Bill Gore's concern too, that we have empty slots and we just fill them up that way. Just to do.
Actually, if we're doing a reservation system, right? Hang on one second. If we're doing a reservation system, we should be able to create a wait list as well, and let people know.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So basically, take down an extra 10 names. If those people don't show within an hour, you call in the other people. The nice thing about this is nobody's 2 miles from the pool. They can pee really quick, right?
Good.
So create a wait list for each time.
But we can't. Right. But not carry over to the next day, though.
No.
Each day, yeah. Right? I like that idea.
That day.
I think, in my opinion, just start with what we have. Well, I think we got to be real fluid. Within the first few days, we might see something that could change in the first week. Right. If a lot of people aren't making reservations, maybe we say it changes the first come, first serve, because a lot of people aren't making them. We can, let's just, whatever you guys have working on right now you think's going to work, let's listen to you, start it, and we'll go from there.
The only way to do it is to try it, Tom,
And I just want to make sure my staff is comfortable with everything as well.
Yeah.
We've got to get into a routine, because this is so out of ordinary. Just keeping everybody 6 feet apart. I'm drawing circles with chalk on the ground so they know how far it is, and just trying to teach them, because they haven't. Again, these kids haven't seen each other for months, and they want to be together, and they get excited, and that's going to be the hardest thing.
May I take part here?
Who's that?
In my previous life.
Logo.
Hello? In my previous life, I've been involved in some of these things, and there are just so many if, ands, or buts. You need to select the plan, you need to follow it, you need to monitor and make adjustments if necessary.
I totally agree.
So I think we've covered this quite a bit. I think we all in agreement what we're basically doing. So
That's
I would
correct.
suggest that we move on.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good. So I'll finish up the application. Finally, what is the date that we're gonna open?
So we had been targeting to start in the middle of the week or on a weekday, just so that we can kind of use a slower time period to kind of knock the kinks out instead of opening on a weekend. It really depends on whether or not our vendor can manufacture the part they need and have, and then how long it's going to take us to get the pool treated and ready to swim in, right? Because that's, I believe, filling it and getting it ready to go in terms of treatment is at least a 5-day cycle. Is that correct, Lynn?
That's correct. We've got to. It takes 3 days to fill, and then a couple of days to get the chemicals balanced. And I think starting in the middle of the week is smart because it'll be slower.
So you're talking probably about the week of June 22nd then.
We were targeting the 17th, which would have been like a Wednesday. And then,
that's not going to happen.
But if it's not going to happen, then we should go for the following Monday.
Good.
Okay.
Or if we have problems, let's go for the 24th. Let that be the alternative. Just in case something would happen that we can't do the 22nd. We should know by next week if the 22nd is good, and if it isn't, then let's go with the 24th, which is Wednesday.
It's fine. I don't care one way or the other.
I'm fine.
And I like the plan to open during the week. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, that's. I think
we have to see if
it was either Lynn or Cindy's, but it is a good idea because that way we're not kind of testing the system at max capacity.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
Because on a weekend, if it's in the upper 80s, we're going to have a ton of people.
Oh, God, yes. Okay.
Sounds good. Anybody have anything else on the
happy.
pool? Or are we good now?
I think we're good.
All right, sounds good. Steve, before we move on, quick 2 things. Do we need to vote next week on a new fee resolution because we're changing any fees?
We have them in the resolution now, so we probably should make a motion. Even if you don't put a new resolution in, I'll check with Steve Corbel and as to how to do it, but either a motion or to amend the resolution or a whole new resolution. It doesn't make any difference. I'll double check with him in the meantime. One way or another, we'll have a motion.
Sounds good. Thank you. The only other thing, I think Frank and Cindy, while we got you on here, what are we looking at now with the playgrounds? I think there's been some change in, I think language is, they can be opened up. What are we thinking on that?
Sorry.
Very simple.
Go ahead, Lynn. Sorry, Cindy.
June 20th was what I asked for to open up the lodge and the parks. Now that the city is going to open their parks, and of course their spray park too. And we are going to open the spray park on the 22nd too, right?
Yeah, that's what I was told today by the guys that are putting it in.
Yeah, and the health department is okay now that the city spray parks are allowed to open. So
I contacted our
spray park on the 22nd.
I contacted our inspector and she hasn't gotten back to me yet.
So let's make sure the health department is set for that. As far as the parks and rentals are concerned, we have to know whether or not we can open for classes again, whether or not we can open for rentals again. I don't know if Keith, that was a question I'd asked Keith and Frank in an email this week. I didn't get a response yet from Keith. He was busy with something, but I want to make sure that it's appropriate to open for rentals, to open shelters for rentals, classes at the pool or the park, at the lodge, et cetera, before we go ahead and do that. And Cindy's been trying to get an answer, and we don't have a final answer on that yet.
So just a quick thing though, just as
I'm asking for June 20th.
So just so that you're aware, the parks have been open. So green space has been open. Fields have been open. No organized sports, but people want to hang out and do whatever at the park. The big question right now is playground equipment. And again, at least from my standpoint, the concern was droplets and the life expectancy on plastic materials and metal materials. Apparently there's been a revision an update in the guidelines from the state, and that was released today. So Keith and I are scheduled to look at it. If we can open it up sooner, great, and if not, the 20th is kind of our target to get everything open back up.
Mayor, if you could also make sure you two talk about rentals and shelters and renting shelters, having classes and renting the lodge again at the same time. So Cindy has some direction. That'd be great.
That's fine.
Classes are not going to start until the fall. The instructors would feel more comfortable having the classes start up in September.
Sounds good. That specifically what I was looking for was the playground equipment really was. So that sounds good, Frank.
Yeah, I kind of figured Tom was asking about the playground equipment.
Well, I know. I just wanted to get everything in at one time.
Yep.
Sounds good. That's all I have, Steve. If you want to keep going with the library, I guess is your next item.
Yeah, Cindy and Lynn, thank you. You guys can get off if you want, or stay
Okay,
on.
thank you.
It's up to you. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, just two quick things, just for information. The library is going to be doing curbside starting next week. You may have seen the signs. They put that big sign on the front. I wasn't real happy with that because they didn't check with me first. But they are opening up for curbside, and they're going to stay open only for that. I don't think the libraries in general have been given permission to open yet anyway, but they've also agreed that regardless, they wouldn't open if we weren't open. So I just want to make sure you were aware of that. And then the other thing is, if you recall from months ago, Penndot is redoing the culvert at Glen Park. And we've got money from that from the state, because that park was originally partially funded by a grant. So they gave us $14,400. At first, I thought, based on what we were told by DCNR, that money had to go back to Glen. They said not necessarily. We can run other projects past them at other parks, and we can use the money for something else. But they would want us to tell them what we're going to do, what we're interested in doing. So I don't think it's just for general maintenance. In other words, I think they're assuming we're going to do something with it. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. That's something we need to talk about in the next few months. They don't need an answer now, but if you're going to do something at Glen, that's fine. If not, if you want to use it at another park, the option is there, but DCNR does want to know first before we spend the money what we're doing. We put the money into a separate account, by the way. We're required to do that. That's all I have.
Sounds good. Thank you. Dave, engineer's report.
Okay, thank you. As was mentioned earlier, the spray toys are in at the spray park at the pool to replace the baby pool. We need to do the electrical connections, which will be done tomorrow. The plumber will be in Friday to do the final connections. And we are going to schedule training of staff next week so that everybody knows how to operate the thing. There are a lot of options we can use with that. We can have different toys on at once, or all at once, or one at a time. But we'll go over all that with the staff, and they can adjust it. We can adjust it the way they want. They will have the ability to adjust it again if they want to change it as things progress. The bid opening was scheduled for tomorrow for the air conditioning at the lodge, pool lodge. Again, we have no bidders. I sent out the advertisement to 11 different companies, HVAC companies, and we still got 0 response. So I'm not sure why, but there was some discussion with Steve Morris and I about whether we want to even proceed with this project. There was an option. Included in the grant is eligible expenditure is for pool furniture. And we'll have about $25,000, $26,000 left over out of the grant. We could use that for pool furniture if we wanted to.
Well, we wouldn't use all of it for pool furniture though, right?
No, we wouldn't. We probably wouldn't. No.
Yeah, Dave, I don't know if I recall, I don't know if this was in a meeting or not, if I just talked to you outside of a meeting, but remember, do you recall me saying that I had 2 or 3 people come up to me and say that they picked up the bids or they looked at the bid sheet for that job, and the number is so low that it doesn't even cover the materials for the job, or the materials are barely underneath what the total job cost. So there's no room in there for them to do any labor, and no one's going to do the job for free. So that I know that we talked about that. I don't know if we need to put something on there to match it, or if we need to put something on there to incentivize these guys to take the bid, or
where were they? First of all, where were they getting their budget number?
They were bidding the job based on what the numbers or the bid sheet that was listed on your website, what they told me. And that was
the bid sheet doesn't.
2 different HVAC guys.
The bid sheet doesn't have any budget numbers on it.
Okay, then they called your office. Then I don't know. They
can get the bid. They could look at the bid sheet. There are some construction notice companies, services that will copy our bid sheet and post it, send it out to contractors. But and I don't know whether we give them a budget figure or not.
Whatever it is, isn't it like close to $30,000? Am I correct?
It's close. It's slightly under 30. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So their numbers were $26,000 to $30,000 just materials to do the job.
Okay.
That's fencing. That's the HVAC. That's the duct work. And they knew the number that they had to be at, and they were at that just in materials. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I think I brought that up to you at one point in time. That's why no one's bidding on this job, because the cost is too low.
There's not enough money there. Okay. Well.
So I'm not opposed to shifting the money to the furniture for the pool, but I do want to let everyone know that if we added maybe $5,000 or $10,000 onto this bid, we could have the entire place AC. So that's the question you want to ask yourself. We're getting this $250,000 in capital, and we could be getting in the capital budget to improve stuff based on our refinancing, our debt refinancing. So could we take $10,000 out of that and add it in this pool thing to make it to air condition the lodge for rentals and make it more appealing? That's something we'll all have to decide on.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Steve. What do you got?
I don't know why we're air conditioning this lodge anyway. Okay. The first thing is there's this big glass windows and doors on the one side that are let heat in. The second thing is we have an electrical problem up there that's never been resolved. It's going to cost a lot of money. What I had suggested to Dave was, because this is a CITF grant, which has very, very specific requirements, let's instead tell them we'd like to modify the grant and do the electric work first. And then we were also going to put some kind of I forget what on the windows, Dave, correct? Something
shading, some kind of shading.
Shading on the windows. And use the grant money for that, because what really was the intent of the grant was other stuff besides air conditioning, like the pool equipment that Lynn wanted, like the chairs and things like that. And this air conditioning got thrown on there as a last thing. So we know we need to fix stuff. Why don't we see if CITF will allow us to modify the grant as part of this, and tell them that down the road, when we get additional money, then we'll worry about the air conditioning. Again, I don't really understand why we're air conditioning a pool lodge with big glass sliding doors anyway. But regardless, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I think we need to do this first. And if we have the grant money to do it, let's see if they'll adjust it and do that, so we get that out of the way and still get the furnishings and things that the pool wants.
All right, if nobody else has any objections, sorry, 1 second, Patty. I think, or you go ahead, Patty, then I'll.
I just want to say that we should probably get a proper energy audit done for both the pool lodge and the Westinghouse Lodge before we start making improvements, so that we have a way to prioritize and allocate what savings would be worthwhile to do on those buildings.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I think I was going to say, Steve and Dave, no one has objections. You're saying there's other things, the wiring. My dad just.
Yeah, there's some wiring problems.
So if we can use this money on those things, let's get those things done. We can come back to the air conditioning later, because I think, like Billy said, I think that's the problem with this, from my understanding as well, is that that job's going to cost a lot more money than what we have. And also, like as Steve was saying, I think I brought this up before too. If we are going to air condition it, we probably need to do a lot more other things to that building to make it energy efficient, or else we're wasting our money in an an electric bill to turn it out the door. So, if no one's any other objections, we can move on. Let's do those things, Dave, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Marcus, good.
Definitely, I agree with Steve. I went to many events at that lodge. People usually have those big doors open. Having an AC will be like a nightmare because there is no need for it to begin with, and people who have all those doors open, it won't work anyway. So I think we should not focus on electricity and all that stuff, or not necessarily AC.
Okay, so we're going to ask the county if we can use the some of the money to improve the electric for a phase 2, which would include air conditioning, and whether we do that down the road or not, it can be decided later. Correct?
Yep, sounds good. That, whatever else you had, the shading, potential furniture, whatever else you.
Well, and the furnishings, yes. Okay.
Whatever else we can squeeze in out of that money, and let's get that done.
Okay. Very good. Anything else on that? Okay, just to report, the pool caulking has been completed. It's been completed for a while. And bids will be open bids will be advertised June 19th and 26th for the roofing of the DPW garage. And they'll be opened on July 8th. We won't have them for the next committee meeting, but we will have the bid results for your July 15th council meeting. So by next month, we'll have quotes on the roof. That's all I have to report.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm being told there's no foreman's report. We'll continue on. I don't have anything else on the rec board. I think the mayor and Cindy and Lynn, we covered everything that was discussed in the rec board meeting thoroughly. That's all I have. Thank you. Anybody else, real quick? Anybody else?
Thank you, Tom. And for all those people that were involved in that process for the pool, I'd like to thank them. I know that it really takes a lot of time to try to go through all those, if, ands, or buts, and try to put a plan together. So I know it takes a lot of work and a lot of back and forth. So thanks to everybody associated with that. Okay, moving on to the next committee. Mr. Goro?
Yes.
Okay, Public Works.
Yeah, so I guess we might as well just get into engineer report from Dave. Dave, I do have one question on the 2019. I know it says that the small section of Watt Lane will be milled out and repaved, but is all the spot sealing and cracks done from the 2019?
The cracks we looked at, and the reason that those were kept a little low is when it heats up, that expands. So we'd have to look at it now that it's hot and see if that's the case. But it was the crack sealer's opinion that we should not fill them all the way to the top, because on hot days like today, the tar would expand, and then you would have it getting moved or tracked out of the crack anyway.
As long as it stays that way all year long, because in the winter time when it's the exact opposite and it contracts, I don't want the water sitting in that well and freezing and thawing and buckling the cement. That's my only concern.
Yes. Well, we'll monitor that and see what has to be done there. The other thing that was taken off, that we did have some stop bars, 2 stop bars that were needed on that job. In the interest of efficiency, we have decided to move those stop bars to the 2020 project. It's not a big cost, a couple $100. So we can close out that project once that patch is done on Watt.
Okay.
For the 2020 paving, again, it was awarded to Victor Paving for the $300,569. Victor subcontracted the job to El Grande Industries and supplied a copy of the subcontract. Wilkinsburg Penn Joint just notified me today that they are going to be starting the water line. They sent out notices. I think they're sending out notices this week, so the residents are going to start that, I believe, next week. So the water line will probably be done in 4 to 6 weeks. DPW, I believe, has some catch basins to do too before the paving starts. So once all that's done, we should be able to start paving. I would guess sometime in July, depending on when things get done. Now, council had previously mentioned the possibility of deleting 2 streets in case property taxes came in lower. With Lee and Decatur being the ones too that would be possibly deleted. However, at the last council meeting, Ms. Sullivan reported the property tax revenue is above the level that we had last year. Does council still want to consider deleting these 2 streets or not?
Well, hold off on what Janet said. I don't know that that's actually 100% accurate yet. So we need to still talk about that when we do a budget.
Yeah, Steve. So after reading this though, I'm fine with deleting the Lee and Decatur and leaving them off and pushing them to next year. But I'd really advise us finishing what Peoples is doing or piggybacking on that on Lenox Avenue.
On Lenox, right.
I would hate to have one lane paved and leave the other one go.
Yeah, it's
and then
going to
have
look
someone
bad.
else come in and remill and redo it in years to follow. So I'd rather use that money to finish Lenox. And that's my opinion, unless if anyone objects on my board. But that would be between Jack and Bill.
Well, we do have time to put off a decision on deleting those other 2 streets until the July committee meeting, if you wanted to do that, because they're not going to get started before the July committee meeting.
Okay.
And then, but the cost of Lenox would be $9,595. Yeah, we got a quote from the gas company. They sub out their paving. Their contractor wanted $29,000. It was just outrageous. It was about 3 times what our cost is. So I wouldn't suggest that we go with them. But I'll go ahead and figure on adding Lenox in, and then we can decide next month whether we have to. Like Steve said, we should, by July meeting, we should have better budget figures for
Correct.
6 months, and we can make that decision at that time.
Jack or Bill, do you oppose that?
No problem. I'm fine.
Okay. And the only other thing I have is there's no movement on the MS4 sediment reduction project. P&L Investments said they were agreeable to an easement, but the solicitor's going to work up an agreement and get that to them for approval. But that we have a couple of years to do that project before it's required, so we have some time.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Dave. Jimmy, you're up.
Yeah, I just have my report there. That's about it. Hey, Dave, the other thing is we're all ready to go for paving for catch basin repairs. We're done.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, good.
But if, I got my list there and that's about it.
Well, I have you in front of us. Thank you very much for the extra lengths of hose for watering the front garden. I appreciate it. Carrying buckets is not my strength these days.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a quick question, Bill, if you're okay with that?
To whom are you speaking, Mr. Morris?
Oh, I'm
Bill,
sorry, Mr. Goro, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
Dave. Yeah, Dave, did you see that email that came out today from Three Rivers Wet Weather about the interim corrective action plan and the TAP allocation plan? Anything
Yes.
we need to do about that?
No, we don't have any potential new developments that have requested taps, so that really doesn't apply to us.
All right, thanks.
Are we done with this committee?
Yes, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Just a note on that half street paving, we do have an account that we did earlier, I don't know how many years ago, which we had to go in and pave the second half of the street after we had a problem with the paving company. I don't know if you recall that, Dave. We actually,
vaguely,
yeah, okay. So we do have precedence for doing that.
yes, absolutely.
All right, we move on to the next committee. Ops and policy, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. President. Steve, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just have one item, both relate, or actually two things related here. Laura Buddy is resigning from the Environmental Advisory Council, effective now. At the same time, we do have a new person interested, Patrick Cooper from Berlin Road, and I copied his email on your notes there. He seems very qualified and is very interested. And if council or the committee is okay with that, I would put that on the agenda for a vote at the next meeting next week.
He did come to the working meeting that the Environment Advisory Council had on Saturday at the bird sanctuary location. And he has a lot of enthusiasm and capability and seems really interested in getting involved. He lives in Edgewood Acres, so he's a Forest Hills resident, quite enthusiastic to get involved.
Any other thoughts? Anyone? Let's go ahead.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
And I believe the next item is Mr. Marco. You have something to contribute here.
Yes, I do. I wanted to catch you up on the status of our work on the climate action plan. If I'm going to share my screen for a moment so I can run this through quickly with pictures, because I think it'd be easier than talking. So I'm going to just bring this up. Can you all see that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have done a climate action statement. This is from our comprehensive plan. We tried to go through the comp plan and pull out all the elements that are relevant and appropriate for the climate action portion. And there are a number of those in each of the areas of our comp plan. There are some that affect our climate action. We have a timeline for June 30th to provide an interim report to ICLEI. We will be able to do that. It'll be pretty much the content of this presentation, but we do have until the end of the year, we have an intern with us until December to help work on developing our climate action plan. Martin Blake has class tonight, which is why he isn't here. Our carbon emissions by category, as you can see, the majority is in residential energy because that's our primary source of emissions. We have a smaller portion from commercial energy and transportation, and less for solid waste, and almost a very small allocation for water and wastewater. So, and this is including everything, not breaking out the borough buildings alone. So we will be looking at developing some climate action, mostly in the way of consumer outreach and making resources available to people for addressing their residential areas. And then we'll be looking at some specific things for transportation and commercial. As you know, we have a compact business area, and we have some locations that are park accessible from much of our area, and a few places for new development. So a lot of things that other people do in climate action plans don't apply to us. We are elevating the community engagement goals. The ones that are relevant here are particularly the non-motorized transportation options, which we are going to be filing a WalkWorks grant due July 2nd to help give us some resources, partly for refurbishing the crazy steps and for helping to provide some resources to improve sidewalks throughout our borough, and also connect residential areas by trails to the existing parks. So we have walkable ways to get into the parks. We have a number of issues in the building and zoning area, in particular pedestrian access to local destinations. We have been looking at revised concepts of how parking and business relationships can be encouraging multi-use of buildings and parking spaces, and looking at vacant space in the parking lots as shared spaces rather than designated spaces. We've talked about this little bit before, but that can have a big impact on our emissions profile in the borough, especially in the business area. Moving to an eco district in the business zone would help us consolidate those kinds of actions, but it will take some collaboration with the business community to make that happen. And that's not going to happen before June 30th by any means. As you can see, we mostly have gasoline in individual transportation and some diesel for emissions in transportation sector. Here again, providing options for people to use non-motorized transportation is a significant thing that we might want to look at. Again, giving people options to move away from fossil-based electricity generation by choosing their generator to be a renewable source from Pennsylvania is an education and information outreach. We're not going to look at rewiring the borough. The environmental goals in the comp plan are almost all consistent with a climate action plan. So these will all be addressed in the climate action plan as part of the comp plan. The walkable neighborhoods is in process. We are looking at various kinds of mitigation things that we have to deal with, and mostly those would be in the area of stormwater and infrastructure deterioration issues. We have the model of our borough building, looking at expanding that to other borough buildings, I think would be a laudable goal and would be looked at in our capital budget going forward. And I think gives us a good opportunity to leverage our experience with the new building into refurbishment and upgrading some of our existing buildings. And this is just giving some profile of our population in terms of housing stock. And again, the fact that we have mostly owner, either with or without a mortgage, owned homes gives us, you know, some parameters for developing programs for energy efficiency in houses. Solid waste really will be involved with our negotiations for our renewal of the waste management contract to include better and possibly more robust recycling options. That will partly be influenced by whether or not a bottle bill will pass at the state level or the federal level, because that will probably have the biggest influence on this of anything that we could do individually as a town. And that this is already covered under our corrective action budget. So I am looking at ways to use an eco district to help generate the conversation around reimagining our business district in the context of the cradle of innovation that we had talked about in the comp plan. And these are some of the things that I think we can look at as we move into that process of having an eco district form along our business district. It's going to take some conversations with the business community, and it's going to take some resources so that we have some leverage to do public-private partnerships with them to the extent that we can have that happen. We may want to revise our zoning for an overlay to allow a conservation district or a eco district to happen in the business area. And I don't think we need this right now. We mostly have natural gas and electricity in our commercial area. So again, efficiency improvements that allow people to improve their profile is probably the best we're going to do. We're not going to be able to do major replacement of existing buildings in a short time frame. So the things that we are looking at right now is to do a more detailed evaluation of this quick overview of our goals. And we've been working on a scoping document that allows us to evaluate different areas and vulnerabilities for mostly the two vulnerabilities that we've identified are vulnerability to landslides and vulnerability to storm damage, both in winter and summer storms. We don't have sea level rise, and a lot of the things that are options on there don't apply to us. We need to have a process for doing a public outreach to receive input from the community. And I really would like to have some input from the council about ways that we might do that under the virus prohibitions. We had planned to do a community outreach effort on Earth Day in April when we had planned the community cleanup, but that was basically sabotaged by the virus. So we're looking for alternative ways to get input from people, possibly a postcard with a direction to go to a Survey Monkey, or possibly to do it as an online survey from our Facebook page or our borough website. We'll be talking about that on the 18th at the Environment Advisory Council. I'd appreciate any ideas you have on that. And I do need to have your ideas, if any, about how we engage the business community in developing an eco-district concept. It does have a fairly interactive process to engage that. We will be able to get some assistance not only from our intern, but also from the Green Building Alliance to do that process of interaction. And I would like to have a plan for doing that. It would be a lot easier to do in person than to do by a virtual meeting, but I think that's something we have to look at. And Mayor Porco, if you wanted to speak to our objectives a little bit, I would appreciate your input at this point from what you were telling me before.
Yeah, so in talking with Patty and kind of getting my arms around this initiative, I think that as a community and as a council, we should try and give some serious thought to, you know, setting a goal of perhaps becoming a completely renewable community. Now, whether that is within 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, I think that merits some further discussion and really needs to kind of be carefully thought through. But for instance, we're just about to take delivery of our if it hasn't arrived already, our very first hybrid police unit. So we're all curious to kind of see how that vehicle holds up to the demands of, you know, a police cruiser that normally runs on gas. But as we begin to, you know, kind of, I guess, assess the performance of that vehicle, et cetera, and it makes sense, I'd like to eventually talk about completely replacing the fleet as cars start to cycle out of service and replacing them with the hybrid vehicles. In addition to that, we should be looking long-term on trying to put, you know, solar panels on every building in the community and tapping the solar panels to kind of power all of our buildings in the community long-term. And, you know, even if that means if it's possible to incorporate that as part of our, I doubt it because of the timing, but I mean, if it's possible that we can incorporate that as part of our roof repair to the Public Works building, we should be trying to do that. So, I mean, long-term, I think our goal should be to become a completely renewable community and kind of just set the standard for the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty lofty goal. It's going to require a lot of thought and consideration. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but, you know, we should be kind of leveraging whatever resources we have available to us to try and kind of pick a date, target it, and just make sure that it's a realistic date so that we're successful.
So I agree with that, but I think one thing we should look at is the operations of the borough, which are municipal functions, and the operations that go on in the private sector, the businesses and the residences, because you're going to have different incentives, different, you know, leverage points in both of those areas. Certainly in our own efforts, this building has become a model for a number of communities. That we're always being asked to share this. To go 12 months straight without paying for electricity is a really good argument for this kind of design. And when you're doing from a new building, it's pretty easy to get to that point. When you're looking at retrofitting things like the pool lodge and the Westinghouse Lodge and the Public Works Garage and some of our other buildings, it's a little bit different kind of a beast. And
Sure.
so I think we need to be realistic about what is achievable and cost efficient. There are some programs available to us as a municipality. I have my intern researching those right now. There are about 12 of them. So we're going to be doing an evaluation of what resources might be able to come to us. I also think it's important to recognize that as programs change at the federal level, we need to be ready to make an ask and have like shovel-ready things in the can or proposals or projects that we can leverage forward when the opportunity is ripe and not wait till the last minute to be scrambling around. So I know there is some conversation on a regional basis with the Connect community to kind of help share these kinds of opportunities and skills with each other. And I fully hope that we can be on the front end of taking advantage of this to go forward. So I would hope that by the end of this month, we'll be able to send around a draft with some proposals in it for your consideration on a 2, 5, 10, and 20-year forecast basis. We have a tool for doing some forecasts based on our emissions profile. And I will want to send that out for comment and tweaking by the community for additions, suggestions, and revisions as broadly as we can manage. So I welcome your input, comments, questions at this point. Any comments, questions?
Did you send us this PowerPoint, this version of it?
I have not sent this around. I can do so if you'd like to have it.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Morris has it. We will be drafting the report from this, and a lot of it was taken from the comp plan. So
Okay.
you've seen a good bit of this material before. We've just extracted the relevant pieces.
Yeah,
from
it's
the comp
nice,
plan.
concise way.
But this graph that's up on the screen now, this is the new information that was obtained through query to the utilities, all the utilities. And this took a lot of work. I mean, our intern from the fall took 3 months to get all this information. And it's, I believe, based on 2017 as a benchmark date for this data.
Anybody else have any comments on this before we move?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else, anything to add to ops and policies? I have one question for Mr. Morris, but anyone else? Steve, back I think in January, February, we had talked about, you had been working with the chief of police about looking at other methods of communication around the borough. And we kind of let that, said we'd talk about it, I think in the late spring, and then the late spring kind of went to hell. Do you think there's an opportunity we could kind of open that up again?
Yeah, he and I originally had been looking at a package that's newer in this area called Savvy Citizen that a lot of people, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are using as either an alternative entirely to SwiftReach or as an addition to SwiftReach. So the SwiftReach could just be an emergency thing, and the Savvy Citizen could be informational. And we've talked to people from Savvy Citizen. We did get some more information from them. And since then, other people have mentioned other things too. I know there are other packages. Savvy Citizen seemed affordable though at the time we talked about it. That was the same thing, if you remember, that Wilkins had been interested in and then finally did decide to use.
Okay. Unless anybody has any objections, I would like us to pursue this as a rather important thing to address, because this pandemic has identified the fact that we don't have a way to communicate with our citizens particularly well, and that's an issue. Anyone? Thoughts? Disagreement?
Great idea. Try to get back on that and get something in place.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Jack, I had a question. What was your proposed plan then? I apologize, I missed your recommendation.
He was looking at a package called Savvy Citizen. He looked at a couple other things since then, but I think kind of set it aside given all that's been going on.
Can I just offer my thoughts on this? In addition to Savvy Citizen, which I believe is primarily it's basically like almost a telephone service, like Swift Reach is, right?
No, it's more computer. Doesn't really have phone service, at least not at this point.
I'm sorry, Steve, is it an email service then, or?
It's internet, and there's an app that you would get on your phone, for example, or on your computer. They may go to phone services sometime, but right now, no.
Because I was going to say, if it's covered by this, then that's fine. If not, I was going to recommend something like there's email, like Constant Contact, for instance, is an example of one. It's it's actually free, I think, for up to a certain number of users, where our residents can opt into that and receive a weekly email update, just to kind of keep people appraised of what's going on as well. So whatever works. I agree. It's we need to kind of improve the way we're communicating with our citizens on a myriad of things. Even though we put information out on our website, make minutes available, it's just it's a different time out there. People just want it delivered to them instead of going out and hunting for it, right? So we just have to do our part there.
All right, I'll continue to investigate. Usually when I've gone to these conferences, there have been people there representing things like Savvy Citizen and others. That's where I've been picking the information up. But of course, there won't really be any conferences this year, at least apparently not. So, but I can keep looking at it and get back to you folks in a few months with some stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone, anything else for ops and policies? Last chance. Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes this report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Moving on to the fifth committee, public safety. Mr. Erbaldinger, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will start with the chief's report. Sorry we are running so late for you. So Chuck.
All right, thank you, Mr. Erbaldinger. I just wanted to say, I mean, we've had some difficult times here recently, especially for police departments and the public who's, very upset. And I just wanted to say that Forest Hills has always been on the forefront of technology and trying to move forward with the best that we can do to provide our citizens with the protection and the service that they need. For example, we were probably, if not the first community to have body cameras in the municipalities. It's been maybe 7-8 years now since we got our first set of body cameras. I mean, we've moved policies almost immediately based on events that have happened in the past. An example of that is when you had that horrific crash on Thanksgiving Day a few years ago due to a pursuit. We immediately, once the DA came out with a policy, we immediately changed that policy because we felt the need to protect the citizens as well as our officers from situations that, sometimes get out of control. So I just want to say that based on our department's past history, that we've always tried to move forward, and we always have an open mind along with this council to look towards what we need to do to make changes to make things better for everyone. And I think we'll continue to do that. That's all I really had to say tonight. I just wanted to let you know that, we do keep track of things that go on. We try to move forward. I think we're probably one of the more progressive departments in pretty much anywhere. So we keep our eyes and ears open, and we try to do what we can, because our goal here is to make it safe for everyone. That's all I have.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments.
I just want to say one thing. I think your practice of de-escalating first, put into illustration many times, I think has been a real hallmark of this police department. And I really appreciate your stance on that and your diligence in exercising that with our police department. We've had a lot of conversations this week about what is and isn't appropriate police behavior. And I can say I feel very comfortable and proud of the police force that we have here, because I feel confident from your words and from talking to many of the officers that we take the course of non-confrontation first and protect everybody involved to the best possible. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. EMS, they submitted their report. They had 32 calls, which I believe is slightly lower than normal, but nothing special on their report. And fire truck, I think we don't need to discuss today. And that's it for public safety.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erbaldinger. Next committee, Mr. Burley, Planning and Zoning.
You're still
Bill,
muted.
we're not hearing you. Is it
Bill,
okay
you're
if I?
still muted.
Yeah, I don't have him muted. I'm not sure. Bill, is it okay if I go ahead with the manager's report?
Sure.
Okay, sorry about, I don't know what happened, Bill. Sorry about that. Just two brief things to make you aware of. First, regarding the Silversmith property, he sent out an email recently to a number of people. I don't even know who all was copied on this. Maybe some of you were, I don't know. But I think I did send it to the council president at least, just in case, about the Atom Smasher. He's looking for help again, trying to do something with that. And I put a copy of his email on your notes that I gave you, where he says time is running out. He's waited for a decade to find a home and he can't afford to wait anymore. He's pleading for ideas. I don't know what he means by that, but I at least wanted to make sure you folks were aware that that email went out earlier this week to a large number of people. Did any of you get that too, besides Mr. Tomasic, who I forwarded it? Ms. DeMarco got it? If anybody else wants it, I'm happy to forward that to you as well. But you see, actually, you have the text, so you probably don't need it. It's on your notes. Does anybody have any questions about that?
There was a response from the people who used to be at Westinghouse, who made a proposal about dividing the property and taking just the Atom Smasher and a part of the parking lot in Chalfont, and then releasing the rest of the property. I don't know whether there's any money behind that or not, but apparently there is a dialogue going on about that.
Okay, well, I'll keep you informed as I get information from him, but I want to let you know that came out. The other thing I have on here, building inspection underwriters, Dave Naylor had sent out an update to everybody in an email last week. I assume you all got it. If you didn't, let me know, and I'll make sure he sends it to you. And I want to let you know, Don Branzel is working on a number of issues, including a vacant property on Edgewood with high grass and weeds. Another one on Barker that Mr. Tomasic has been also working on, with an abandoned car that the chief has worked on, and rats and trash and things like that. And I think they were pretty successful in getting that resolved. And we're back again at the 21 Marion property with high grass and weeds. And I'm not sure if anything was done with that yet, but we're gonna probably have the crew go on to get that and then lean it again. I think we've done that several times before. And of course, Dawn is also working on the usual things with trees and other things as well. That's all I have, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Okay, Bill, is that all right? Can you hear me, Mr. Burley? Okay, but we can't hear you. All right, I guess that concludes Mr. Burley's report. Thank you.
I had included the solicitor's report there in case Steve Corbell had anything, by the way.
Oh,
I
I'm
have
sorry.
nothing. No, I have nothing to add.
I'm sorry, I wasn't to that page yet. Okay. Nothing.
I won't
to
hold
add.
it.
Well,
I won't hold it against you, Bill.
I have some questions for you, Mr. Corbell, in terms of the solicitor's report.
Sure.
So when will we be getting that investigative document?
My hope is it'll be delivered tomorrow.
Okay, and then concerning moving forward on that issue, we are going to possibly have some exec sessions, which I believe you suggested that we need to have in person. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, some cow items. There's nothing on here. Mr. Morse, do you have anything before I go into the couple of items I have?
Nothing to add.
Okay, So first off, we're in the green, which changes how we can run things here, I believe. And we're going to have to be looking, I believe, at least some executive session in-person meetings, which sets the stage up for moving forward into this month, the next meeting, and then those in July. First off, we have next week's meeting. Do we want to do in person, or do we want to continue with this format that we have in place right now? Is there anybody has any opinions as to what we should be doing for the next meeting?
I do.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. Sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, this is Jack. Yes, I would like to continue in the virtual approach, at least for the next month, despite the fact that we are green. There's still a great deal of risk out there. And
Yeah, I was going to say at least until the buildings reopen. So at least one more, and then look at July. And then, like Mr. Corbel stated, if we have to get together for the regular business meeting in July, potentially whenever it needs to be for an exec session, we can do whatever that meeting is in person so that we're already there for that. I think that's my opinion.
I don't care either way, but I think it's important that we all do the same. We either are all going to the meeting or we're all on Zoom. We can't have mix and match. That's what I would care. But I don't mind to do the Zoom a little bit longer.
I think once we have the building open in July, we can go back to in-person meetings, and I'd feel more comfortable if we wait until then.
I would just, I could just say one thing. I would just need to know then for July, well, first, the July 2nd meeting, we would not be open. That's a committee meeting, assuming you're doing 2 committee meetings in July. For the 7th, possibly. Again, I need to see how things work out, but we're shooting for that general area. But I would need to know in advance whether or not you want to do that. Now, hopefully by July 15th, I think we will be open on a modified basis for the regular meeting. So if you wanted to do Zoom until then, that would be okay too. Just my opinion.
Okay, so first off, this month, the next week's meeting is going to be on the Zoom platform. Would everybody agree that we could cancel the July 2nd committee meeting that is now set up like we have done the last 2 months, and then move it to the following week when we will have all the committee meetings again as we have just done? Is that acceptable?
works for me.
Okay. And then we'll be looking at July in terms of in-person and exec sessions. Mr. Corbel, could you chime in, please, on the in-person / exec session deal?
Yeah, I think if you all are able to do so, as long as there's the room to have social distancing in the meeting room, which I'm pretty sure that it was done in March before we were able to jump on here because of the legal change. I really don't see an issue with it. As long as everybody's comfortable, there's no reason why at our voting meeting in July, or even that combined committee meeting, if you wanted to push it, although Mr. Morris seemed to say that may be a little bit of a question mark. Maybe it's just better to say we'll meet in person for the voting meeting in July, and then moving forward until circumstances may or may not change.
Okay, so I guess we're basically in agreement to move along with this stuff as we have been doing. Does anybody have any questions about the meeting dates as of now and what we're going to do?
No, that's fine. The earliest we would have an exec session regarding the report would be after the business meeting in July, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know yet because as Mr. Corbel indicated, the length of the report and the time frame that we need for everybody to be able to view the document on their own time. So that's going to cause some problems in terms of trying to set something up. So everybody needs access to that document first. Yes, Mr. Morris.
What I was going to do was, once I get the document, from Steve. I may double check this with him, but I will set up some times that I'm available and I will email that out to everybody. First come, first served. I'll have whoever can come in to view the document, sit in the community room. That way you're private, you're by yourself. You have the whole room to yourself, et cetera. And you don't have to worry about, being listened to or observed or whatever. And then I'll, give the copy that's earmarked for each person to them, get it back that time, and I'll schedule it that way if that's okay. Hopefully, if we're able to start with it, let's say next week sometime, you'll be able to have it ready so you can finish for the exec session on the July, 17th? No, 15th meeting.
I think a month would be sufficient time to allow everybody. It's a good hour or two of time you'll need to spend with it.
And Mr. Corbel, there's no problem with more than one person being at the room at the same time reading this report, is there?
No.
Okay, so people can come together, they can come and be at the same time, whatever the case is.
Like I said, I'll email out a schedule that when I know I'm around.
Thank you. The only other thing I'd like to talk about very quickly is when we do have the in-person meetings, we probably should be wearing masks. I'm assuming that that's still going to be something to push forward from the governor. One item that I think that I would like the council to chime in on is the possible thermal scanner for people that do come into the meetings. I noticed that a lot of businesses have gone to this, and to be truthful, I watched some of those scenes out of China and out of Korea and Japan, not so much Japan, but I think it was Hong Kong or whatever. They were doing this thermal scanner stuff all the way back in January, and I went to the doctors and they pulled out a thermometer and stuck it in my mouth. So I'm thinking that maybe we should look into investing in one of these things for our meetings. I know Mr. Burley, he has all kinds of devices. He has the thermal scanner. He has the red count, the red cell blood count and all that stuff. So
check out Mr. Morris, Mr. Tomasic.
There we go. All right. So we're looking good here. All right. So I guess that concludes everything I have to say. Does anybody have anything they would like to add before we end tonight's meeting? Okay. Thank you all very much. Greatly appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Everybody have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.